Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Matt back with another video. Today I'm talking about the TTArtisan 25mm f2, which I'm using to film this part of the video right now. This is what it looks like straight out of the camera, and then this is what it looks like after a little bit of processing, so you can see what you can actually do with the image. A lot of people might be interested about this lens because it only sells for $64 on Amazon. That is extremely cheap, and you might be wondering how good can it actually be for that price. That's what this video is here to help you decide. I'll also do some comparing between this 25mm f2 and the TTArtisan 27mm f2.8 because they're very similar and I have both. I just reviewed the 27mm not that long ago. And some people might be trying to figure out which one to buy. I'll do some comparing between these two lenses in this video. First, I'll do the physical aspects right now, and then we'll do the image quality a little bit later. So let's go do it. So now we're on to the physical aspects of the 25mm f2 from TTArtisan, and I will do some comparing to the 27mm f2.8 autofocus, also from TTArtisan, that I recently reviewed. But let's just focus on this one really quick before we do the comparison so it doesn't get confusing because they're so similar. So it's an f2 lens. The aperture ring is up here at the front. It has clicks. It has focus scales on here for zone focusing, focusing by distance. I personally just use focus peaking myself. And yeah, I mean, there's really not a lot to talk about with this lens. It's a very, very simple manual focused lens. There's not a lot of bells and whistles going on here. And you wouldn't really expect that to be the case for a $64 lens. So it makes sense why it's so simple. Just really quickly though, we'll compare it to the 27mm f2.8 AF. I just recently reviewed some differences, and at the end I'll really talk about why you would choose one over the other, but I just want to highlight the differences between these two lenses because I feel like a lot of people might be choosing between them. So as you can see that the 25mm manual focus lens over here is a little bit, has a bigger front element than the autofocus 27 over here. That's because it lets in an extra stop of light, so that makes sense. They are essentially the same exact thickness, but the 25mm on the right here extends a little bit as you change the focus ring, so it gets a little bit longer. Not too much though. For some reason, the aperture ring is at the back of the 27mm while it is at the front of the 25mm. It's also very thin on the 25mm. And there is a half stop between 2 and 2.8. There's full stops from 4 to f8, and then there's no half stop between, there's no full stop between 8 and 16 for whatever reason. And then the 27, the autofocus one, has half stops between every aperture. And because it's a electronically controlled aperture, they're all spaced evenly. Well, that is not the case with the 25mm f2. Other general differences: the 25 manual focus lens is much heavier than the 27 autofocus lens, and it's $64 for the 25 versus $100 and some for the 27. So there's, you know, this is a little bit nicer lens all around. But you know, that's enough talking about the 27mm. We'll bring it back up here at the end, but let's focus back on the 25mm f2 for now and get onto the image quality, which is really the most important aspect of any lens. So now we're on to the image quality of the 25mm f2, and I'll be filming the rest of the video on the Fuji 23mm f2 so I can lean in and out and not have to worry about going out of focus. The main thing about this lens is that it's very, very low contrast, wide open, and it washes out extremely easily if there's a bright light source just outside of frame or directly in frame. Especially if you're wide open, it's still not great to stop down either. I suspect it doesn't have very good lens coatings. It also has very strong vignetting wide open, which was a problem with the 27mm as well. But another major problem with this, especially if you want to shoot landscapes, is that it has blurry image corners all through the aperture range, even stopped down. The 27mm f2.8, it had vignetting, but at least it was sharp in the corners. It didn't have a noticeable blur at f8 around the corners, so very not good if you want to do landscapes or if you want to take photos that are sharp throughout the entire frame. One thing I do have to give it props for is the fact that it's actually very sharp if you can nail your focus manually. It's much sharper than the 23mm f2 I'm filming on right now, wide open, especially at close focusing distances. It surprisingly doesn't have very much chromatic aberration either, even if with contrasting edges on bright light sources, so very decent. And the bokeh is really not that bad either. There's nothing to complain about at all. It's smooth. It's not like jittery or really bad. It's probably about on par with the 23mm f2, which is Again, pretty impressive from TTArtisan. The colors aren't really anything to write home about. I don't think they're pretty washed out during the day. I don't know, it's just not great in bright environments, like shooting in broad daylight. There's just too much excess light bouncing around. There's not a good enough coatings on the image elements, and the images are just kind of during the day. I don't like them very much. But if you're shooting it on an overcast day where the light is more even and controlled, I actually find the images to be pretty nice. The vignetting's so strong that it's just so noticeable wide open at f2, and it does give it kind of a cheap look. I think for subject photography, if you want a little bit of background separation, f4 on this lens is a nice sweet spot. It kind of gets rid of some of those optical imperfections. If you don't have a bright light source washing out your image, you can get some pretty decent images at f4. One of my main complaints is that it doesn't have nearly enough contrast. It gets washed out way too easily. The blacks aren't dark enough, and it doesn't look right if you have to really process the images from this, which can be destructive. It's obviously better to get a lens that puts a really good image onto the sensor so that you don't have to manipulate a lot in order to make it look good. But that's what you get when you pay $64 for a lens. So that's my honest review of this TTArtisan 25mm f2. Overall, very impressive, especially in terms of sharpness, in terms of the fact that the bokeh is not bad, but it's $64. They cheaped out somewhere. The manual focus isn't bad. The aperture ring, I don't mind that it's small. Like I can get on with the actual build quality of the lens. The main drawback is just the image quality itself, mainly in terms of the fact that the lens just flares way too easily. It washes out way too easily. It makes it almost unusable as an all-purpose everyday lens because it only works well in certain environments. My advice to you is that if you're gonna get a lens, I mean, pay like $200 minimum for a used, preferably first-party lens. Getting these third-party lenses, I don't really see the point in getting a 25mm f2 third-party lens. Personally, I would almost always, because that's such a standard lens, you're going to use that lens so often, I wouldn't cheap out on that. I'd at least get the 23mm f2 from Fujifilm. You can get it used for probably 300 bucks. All right, save up. It will definitely be worth it. It'll be useful in more situations, and you won't have to upgrade it. You're gonna have to upgrade this thing anyway. Unless it's just a temporary fix and you know that, and you don't have any money, but you really wanna shoot your camera, and you don't have a lens. Like this, that's the only situation I can see getting this. Personally, if I'm gonna get a third-party lens, I'm thinking back to whenever I first got into photography, I would get it to try out a new focal length, a weird focal length. Like I got the Pergear 12mm f2 for like 100 bucks because I didn't know if I wanted an ultra wide lens. That's where I think those cheap third-party lenses come into play. Either that, or if you're gonna get an f0.95 lens just to see what it's like, just so you can scratch that bokeh itch or whatever. Try out something weird if you're gonna get a third-party lens. Don't get something so standard. Because it's just gonna be lackluster, okay? Spend a couple $100 on your lens, it'll be worth it, trust me, all right? This was an honest review from me. I was sent this lens to review, but I always am very honest in my reviews, and I hope you can see that and appreciate that, because I want you to trust what I have to say. Otherwise, what is the point of me making these videos? So leave a like if you enjoyed, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Are you gonna get this or the 27mm f2.8 from TTArtisan? Is there a reason you got one over the other? I'd love to check in with you and have a conversation about it. What do you think about getting a $64 third-party lens? Do you think it's just stupid? Is there a reason that I'm missing that you might get it? Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace.